Hi, and welcome to the Bookworm in Christ podcast. I'm Abena, and this podcast is for book reviews, book recommendations, author interviews, and all things bookish, particularly within the Christian romance genre. And I anticipate branching out into other Christian fiction and nonfiction as well. Now, this is the last episode for January. And so in this one, I will share the books I've read, the books I DNF'd, and particularly the reason why I started recording this episode is what really counts as Christian romance or Christian fiction broadly. And I'll explain why. Now, let me start off with the books I read this month. If you watched or listened to the previous episode, I did a book review of From Ice to Home, which is up there somewhere. A hockey romance, a Christian hockey romance by Anne J. David, which I absolutely loved. I think that was that the first book I finished this year? Let me pull out my StoryGraph quickly. Even though I just realized I haven't been as diligent as I thought I would be. And this is partly because I don't like starting a book, listing it as a book I'm reading, and then along the line I don't finish it for one reason or the other. I don't like posting about books I did not finish. I don't think it's fair to the author or to potential readers who might enjoy it. I don't like posting about books I did not finish because I don't think it's fair to the author or to readers who might see my review and decide not to read it. And for all you know, maybe it would have been the right fit for them. And I feel like this is a conversation that keeps happening in the bookish online community all the time about, giving 1-star reviews or DNFing or saying you didn't like a book. I think sometimes when we post these things, people forget that everybody's opinion is quite subjective based on their life experience, based on where they are in life at the point where they read the book. And even the lovely ladies on Clean Romance podcast recently did an episode where they talked about how women's hormones affect their reading. And I think that is a game changer. I think it should go viral for people to realize that how you review books is not solely dependent on objective thoughts, but that the timing, what's going on in your body, what you're experiencing personally, past experiences, all of those things color your feelings about a particular book. It really is a game changer. And so even I have had the experience where I read a book at a particular time, I enjoyed it, I tried it another time, and I could not get through it. There are those unique books that no matter what point in your life you read, you will still enjoy. But generally, reviews are very subjective things. And so I think that episode on Clean Romance podcast was very enlightening, especially since women tend to read more globally. Now back to what led me on that tangent. So let me see. I want to get through what I read this this year. And so I finished The Words We Lost by Nicole Deese. Brilliant book, like such a brilliant work of Christian literature. And I mean, it's so well written. The themes are so well brought out. I really loved the relationships described in the book. Apart from, the central romance, the friendships between the main characters, their families, and it delves into so many important issues. I will make time to do a full review of that book because it's absolutely phenomenal. And so I read From Ice to Home, which I have here by Anne J. David. I also read The Words We Lost. I started it last year, but I finished it this January by Nicole Deese. Almost forgot this one. And it's actually the one I finished most recently. But I think I really need to get into the reason I started recording because my mind is all over the place. But I also read Honest Refuge. I finished it. It was my book club's book of the month for, I think, November, December. And I started it over again and I finished it and it was so good. It's by Haley Bridgman. And it's one of those Christian romances that really delves into gritty topics because it features an MMC who is disabled. He is a war veteran, and then, he's dealing with issues to do with losing a part of his body to war. And then the woman who is in love with him and can't seem to make him see it. And it was just beautiful. Like, there's a whole lot of suspense in it. I really enjoyed it. And I've come to realize that Haley Bridgman is one of my favorite authors now. Now to the main issue at hand. The reason I started recording this video. So this past week or so, I read 2 books, or I should say I read 1 book and the other one I had to DNF for reasons I will explain soon. The first one was a traumatic story of a woman whose life falls apart when I don't even know if I should give the details, but basically her life falls apart as her marriage falls apart. And the trauma she has to go through with her 3 children, trying to make ends meet. And let me tell you, this was very traumatic. And I don't like sad books. I don't like sad books. And so I ended up, trying to read through very quickly, because this was given to me by a friend and I wanted to be able to give an honest review of it. The story is just sad. It is absolutely too sad. And so I skipped to the end, hoping there'll be a happy ending. And thankfully, there was a happy ending. But anyway, because of that, and then this next book I read, which I assumed was a Christian romance, started off very nicely. And then boom, somewhere along the line, I'm hit with descriptions of, pardon me, but an erection, and then later on, about physical attraction. And don't get me wrong, God created us. He created sex. He created sexual desire. And the world has, polluted it. And so I am very much for the Christian fiction community taking back romance and taking back descriptions of intimacy. However, I think there is a fine line between providing the context and for providing descriptions of intimacy or lovemaking in the context of Christian literature and what is appropriate. There's a thin line between that and writing in a way that can titillate the senses or cause someone to imagine things in a lustful way. And unfortunately, I think this author crossed the line a bit. I do get what they were trying to do, to show that sex is not boring for Christians and it shouldn't be seen as taboo. I agree with that. But I've come to realize that this is such a sensitive topic that if you are not careful to write it with sensitivity, you could end up writing in a way that is no different from smart. Now, these two books, one for traumatizing me and one for unexpectedly bringing explicit material my way when I have decided not to consume that kind of material, especially in the context of a book I presumed was a Christian romance. It really got me down. Like, I got so down that my daughter noticed and asked me, "Mommy, why are you looking sad?" And it brings me to something that is very dear to my heart. How the kinds of content we consume deeply affect our emotional and mental health. And books, it's shocking that books have gone so many centuries without clear labeling of the content. In recent years, I know that some books have trigger warnings or content warnings. If you go the further step of going on places like StoryGraph, Goodreads, online bookstores, they'll provide descriptions that may contain or highlight the themes that are in the books, which could be potential triggers for some readers. But to a large extent, you go into a book and you have no idea what can jump out at you. And so I have actually started a petition for publishers, authors, booksellers to adopt some sort of rating guide or warning guide for readers that can alert them to the kinds of content. Because this goes beyond just sexual content. It goes to depictions of traumatic events, because there are some books that can trigger people's memories of their own trauma and cause them to experience mental distress. Like, there's research to back what I'm saying. And I don't think we give enough credit to how strong books are in determining what we believe, how we feel, and how we look at life in general. And so, even though reading these two books really disturbed me, mentally, I'm glad it did, because it raised this issue for me to go the further step to turn it into a petition for a global, step back, on the parts of publishers, writers, and so on, to rethink the ways that books are marketed, categorized, so on and so forth. And this is just so that, for example, if you're a parent and you want to buy a book for your child, it would be helpful to know that, okay, these are some of the themes in the book. And then maybe if you feel it's at a level that you don't want your child to be exposed to, then you don't buy that book. Or then you know how to go about it. You read it with them or something. Because I remember, I don't know if it was last year or a couple of years ago, there was news about this woman who bought a book for her teenager because it had an illustrated cover. And romance readers, we all know how much illustrated covers have become the order of the day. And some of these illustrated covers, they are, pun intended, they are cover-ups for very explicit content. And just yesterday, on a post, I think I saw on this Will Pass, he does these videos where he goes to stores and asks people what they are reading or what they've read in the past month. And there was a particular post where somebody mentioned, a teenager mentioned that she was reading, I don't think I want to mention the book. She was reading a very popular ice hockey romance, which has an illustrated cover. And in the comments, like just as I had, when she mentioned that, I felt worried. People in the comments wrote that, how is a teenager reading this book? It has an illustrated cover, for crying out loud. And I know these are marketing decisions that publishers are consciously making to attract young readers to more and more explicit content, just to make money. And it's dangerous. And so all I'm saying is we need to come to a consensus about how to ensure that people go into books knowing what to expect, not providing spoilers. That's something completely different. But let me give an example. Food. When gluten became a thing, there is no food you will see that will not tell you whether it is gluten-free or contains gluten. Nuts, there are candies, cereals, so on and so forth, that will tell you this product was produced in a factory that also deals with nuts or something. Eggs, so much work has gone into making sure that when people purchase food items, they know what is inside. There's clear labeling of the ingredients, even if most of the time we don't read it or we don't understand what it says. It's there. And so for people who maybe have allergies or dietary requirements, they're able to know that, okay, this one is not good for me. This alternative would be better for me. Why don't we do the same for books? Music, you see it on the CD, explicit content. Movies, before it starts showing, parental guidance advised, 13 plus, rated R, and so on and so forth. Like there are even some movies I know in the West, like in Europe or in the US, if you don't show ID that you are 18 or above, correct me if I'm wrong, you will not be allowed to purchase the tickets. Movies, music, TV shows, food. We put so much effort into ensuring that people know what they're about to consume. Books are something we consume. Why are we not clearly labeling them? And why are we misleading young people to think that, oh, this book has an illustrated cover, so it must be for me, and putting explicit content in them? Anyway, that is the publishers and writers' prerogative. But I think we should be held responsible for letting people know what they are in for. Personally, I don't like reading traumatic books. And so there are certain authors whose books I read once and I'll never read again because it was just trauma. Some people love that. And so they know that, okay, this writer is for me. But do I need to go all the way to purchase the book to read through to chapter 12 and realize that, oh no, I need to stop here because it's disturbing my mental health? And so that is really what this episode is about. Like, what do people think? And then it also sets me wondering and realizing that the same way the Bible tells us that not everyone who calls me Lord, Lord will join me in my kingdom. In the final days, some will call Lord, Lord, and God will say, I never knew you. In the same way, I have realized that there are some books labeled as Christian fiction, Christian romance, and the content is not written in a way that is appropriate. To be very honest, and people will tell you, oh, God led me to write this. There is a way to write certain kinds of trauma, like sexual trauma, domestic violence, that it can still elicit emotion without being overly graphic or causing the audience to be titillated. And I really am for more Christian romances to depict that sex is desirable and enjoyable within the covenant of marriage. And again, this can be written in a very godly way. And I've come to find that there are some authors who may not label their books as Christian, but you see their values coming through in the way they write some of these things. And on the other hand, there are those who have boldly labeled their books as Christian. And it is far from that. Like, in my excitement to get more and more Christian romances, I realized that I made some mistakes along the line. There was one book where, there were F bombs and D bombs and S bombs, all the bombs, because they feel like they are depicting reality. But you can just as easily say he cursed or he cussed. Some choose to just put the first letter and then asterisks. It depends, but I think what would really help is for authors to be more conscious of the power of books, the power of what they are writing can have on readers, and to go that extra step to warn their readers. Personally, I've come to realize that reading affects me, mentally and emotionally. And so I go out of my way to avoid traumatic books. And it's also one of the reasons why during COVID, I turned towards romance, because romances assure you of a happily ever after. Now, that is another conversation. Why are some books tagging themselves as romance when they are just women's fiction with a sprinkling of romance? Because there's so much tragedy. You ask yourself, how is this romance? And I think after COVID, especially when they realized, sales were shooting up in the romance genre, some people just wanted to ride off that wave. And so they'll plaster romance on it, and it's just women's fiction or just literary fiction. Well, that's the world of marketing for you. Anything to make a sale. But I think it's very important, not even just for kids, but for adults as well, especially if you are very sensitive to certain things, to be able to know before you read a book that this has this, depictions of death, depictions of miscarriage, divorce, some things that others may read and just gloss over can be really triggering for others. And yeah, I think this is a very important topic I will probably come back to again. But then I wanted to ask a question, and I did a poll in my book club and on my Instagram last night to find out what really constitutes Christian romance or Christian fiction. And I realized that it's not just when the author says they are Christian. There are Christian authors who write smart. It's not just a book that is labeled as Christian, because I have come across books labeled as Christian which have explicit content. And it's not just if the characters are Christian. I've read books where it's just basically describing the challenges and the mishaps of Christians in a Christian setting, but it doesn't really give you any lesson or draw you to God or draw you to Christ, And so I think the key is to ask yourself, this book I'm writing or this book I'm reading, is it drawing my mind to Christ? Is it directing me towards scripture? Or is it just, and I think there is room for all kinds of Christian literature. It doesn't always have to be so deep in order to be Christian, because sometimes you do want to just have fun, but it shouldn't pull you away from God. I think that's what the point I want to make. Okay, I would really love to hear your thoughts. I will probably do a post on my Instagram and TikTok, and I would love to hear what people think about this, about labeling books with warnings. Also, the Redeemed Romance Read Along is still on. You can find it on StoryGraph. We posted some book recommendations. If you'd like to find out where you can get some of the books, just send me a message. I'll direct you. And in February, so we might not be going according to the way the challenge is laid out, because I'm a mood reader and I found that I don't stick to the script. But I think in February we are supposed to be doing Friends to Lovers. Let me check quickly. But February is the month of love, of course. And what more perfect time than February to read more Christian romances? So if you're looking for recommendations, follow me on Instagram, TikTok. Don't forget to subscribe on my YouTube and follow me, follow the podcast here on Spotify. And I'm still trying to figure out how to get on Apple Podcasts. And that's crazy because I use Apple, but yeah, pray for me as I try to figure my way out. But so yes, I was right. We are supposed to be going to Friends to Lovers, but I might read something else. And I think we are going to start pushing for, doing a photo challenge alongside the read along. So yeah, that's what it looks like on my page. And yeah. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, I would really, really love to talk more about this issue of content and trigger warnings and what really is Christian romance. So let me know. Thanks and see you in the next episode. Bye.